My name is Richard Furr, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm Cloud Hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am Cloud Hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Mike Gibbs, and I am here to help you build your technology career. Maybe your goal is to become a security architect, or a cloud security architect, or an AI architect, or an enterprise architect, or a cloud architect. Well, I want to help you get there. I've been an enterprise architect, network architect, and many other architects now for over 25 years. I've helped people get their first tech job, get promoted in tech, and my clients are now working at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, PNC Bank, Palo Alto, Zscaler, NetSpoke, and so many other companies throughout the world. And I just want to help you get to your goals. And I remember in the early days of my career, I just didn't know what to do. And I took certifications that weren't even in my career or didn't even make sense. I did all these things. And in the end, I had to do something different to get to my goal. And that's why I want to help you. So you can just ask your questions so we can do what we can to help you. And that's why we do this once a week at Go Cloud Careers. Before we begin, I want to tell you about some free things that we have for you because I really want to do everything we can to help you in your career. We have a completely free CCSK boot camp coming on March, and the week of March 17th. Chris, tell me if I'm assuming that's the date that we chose, if that's still the time. And during that week, we will be a live and free program, and it will be a full week of CCSK cloud security training based upon what the Cloud Security Alliance recommends. We're excited to really do it. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. The CCSK is a perfect intro to security. It's like a very elementary certification. It's a great place to start. And of course, you always need a little more, so we added some extra identity and access management, pretty much at the CISSP level, and we added some other cool stuff. And we even teach you what a cloud is, and we map out what a cloud is so you now understand how you're really going to secure it. Far greater than you ever could in a basic cloud provider certification, because we're going to dive deeper into security, and you'll know what to do on any cloud provider after this, or any data center for the most part. So it's all free. So sign up. The link is in the description of this video. My team is popping it in the chat box. I also want to tell you that in the description of this video, we have guides on how to become a cloud architect or how to become a security architect or how to become an enterprise architect. We have guides on how to win the architect interview and so many other free things, and they're all free. So go check it out. Go grab some. And tomorrow we have what I love to do once a week. I have a once a week how to become an architect webinar. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how to become a cloud architect. But if you've got questions on becoming an enterprise architect, AI architect, or security architect, I'll cover them there too. And what we'll do is we'll talk about the architect role what we actually do as a cloud architect or a solutions architect versus what people think we do. We'll talk about the exact skills you need, and we'll go head to toe from the beginning to the end. So you can, I mean, if you're with us, you'll learn them because we teach them. And if not, you'll figure out where to get them. Executive coaches, for example, MBA programs, but you'll know all the skills you need to get there. And we want to make sure that we do that, and it's free. And not only we talk about the role for about a half an hour, afterwards, we will answer any questions you have live and free on Zoom. So come join us tomorrow, completely free. Now, at this point, please bring your questions to me. I want to be able to help you, but I don't know how to help you if I don't know what you're looking for. So please bring some questions, and I'll do anything I can to get you to your goals. Hi, Mike. You're curious what the typical career progression is for an AWS architect. So let me do a little clarification, Tin Man. For the most part, there's no such thing as an AWS architect and look to work for Amazon Web Services. Here's the reality. 89% of all customers have a multi-cloud architecture. 89%. And for the most part, the biggest companies that you most likely want to work with have 98% of them have a multi-cloud architecture. So the reality is if someone only knows AWS architecture, there's honestly not very many jobs they can do. And here's the reason, Tin Man. When we design a cloud architecture, enterprise architecture, any of it, we're typically dealing with 20,000 remote, maybe 20,000 routes in the routing table, maybe 100,000 IP addresses, maybe 1,000 different applications across 200 and 300 different vendors. So that's reality. So AWS may be only one of the 300 vendors that we actually have to deal with from an architecture perspective. So if the progression I'm assuming you don't mean an AWS architect. Now, an AWS solutions architect is a very special role, and I'll tell you what it really is. It's someone who works for AWS, designs, presents, and sells AWS solutions and integration into other business solutions and other technology platforms. So for example, you may be on AWS, but they could be using Cisco voice servers on AWS and Oracle database servers on AWS and Palo Alto virtual firewalls on AWS. So please understand, it's not enough to be an AWS architect. So let's say you're a solutions architect or a cloud architect. Now here you really have two choices where you can take your career, and actually three, and I'll talk about all three. So the best architects are the ones that can drive digital transformation. And that means the ability to understand the business's needs, to be able to understand the business's architecture, to be able to help optimize that business architecture and the way the organization does things to align the organization's people, processes, and technology. And then to be able to create and lead an architecture team, deliver all the executive presentations you need to, manage all the key stakeholders that you need to, create all the architectural documentation, manage and create an architectural review board, create governance structures, lead the response of an RFI, RFP, RFQ. Now, why am I saying that? That's the job as an architect. It's not like we touch the technology. It's not that at all. So now that you know the job, look at what that does. Who else has to present to the C-suite? Who else has to present to the board? Who else has to lead and facilitate meetings? Who else has to lead architecture teams and drive $1 billion architecture like an architect? So you've got a couple ways you can take your career. One is I know a lot of architects go straight into management, and it's really funny. I have one architect that I've been training, and he just took a VP position. And I think that's probably a better position for him. It's a bigger, more executive role, and he's happy, and it's great. So there is that. So a lot of us architects move into executive roles, like the example. Now, we can also move into executive technology roles, like CIO roles or CTO roles. Now, if we're a solutions architect, and that's the lowest level, most entry level of all the architects, which is where I started my architecture career. You know, initially I was a solutions architect. A couple months later, I was a senior solutions architect. And within 2 years, I was a principal solutions architect. So that becomes kind of a specialty subject matter expert on there. But often the architects, the solution architects, choose to go the other way. So you, instead of diving deep and going to become a principal architect, you can get more business skills, more executive skills, and then you move into more enterprise architecture roles, which are more CIO or CEO roles, like your CIO type roles. And the CIO roles can often move into other C-suite roles, especially if it's a technology company. So you can take it to the executive path, be like the enterprise architect, chief architect, CIO, and then other ways. You could take it to the VP or the director level path because you have to have all these good skills. Or you can stay in the solutions architect role and just become more technical. They're really kind of any of those roles are good. Now, as you move into more business roles, you earn more. You earn far more. As you move into chief architect roles, where you're really focused on aligning people, processes, and technology. These are big enterprise architect roles. It's not abnormal to see a $500,000 to an $800,000 role for people that have the expertise and the experience in the business acumen. So you can stay in an architect role as long as you want, but you have to actually be able to do the job and know what the job is. And that's the key. And there's a big difference between the certifications and the job. And I see one question's there, and I can talk about the difference of why the certifications aren't getting people interviews by themselves and what it's actually going to take. And so we will get to that question as well. I know there's a bunch of questions, but you can get your interviews. You just have to do a few different things. Chris, we can bring the next one in. And please feel free to ask them. We want to help. What are the advantages and disadvantages of mastering one cloud completely or becoming a cloud architect and learning the other clouds? So if you only know one cloud, here's the reality check. There's not going to be any jobs for you. So you have to know more than one cloud. Now, why is that? Because most people wouldn't put all their eggs in one basket, and most businesses won't. You know, we're in a cloud repatriation movement where people are taking high work performance, high workload, high throughput solutions off the cloud and bring them back to the data center in a private cloud-like manner. We'll have our things in AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle. We'll be in co-location sites, and we'll be in specialty clouds and community clouds. This is the reality of architecture. So if you only know one cloud, that's the functional equivalent of knowing how to drive one kind of car and only one kind of car. And that's going to be a problem if you travel or something happens to the car and you have to drive another car. So you have to know the cloud. But here's the good news. You know, we architects aren't engineers. We're not configuring the stuff. So what we really need to understand is this. Given that it's a multi-cloud architecture that we're dealing with, if we understand the underlying technology, guess what? You know, all clouds. You know, people think cloud computing is new. The first cloud I worked on was in 1993, the ISDN cloud, and then the Frame Relay cloud, and then it was the BGP cloud, RFC 2547 from the IETF, and then it was the VPLS cloud that my team at Riverstone was helping to contribute to make that even possible. And then after that, it became private clouds, public clouds, that kind of thing. So if you understand that, you understand it's all the same. A router in the data center is the same as a virtual router in the cloud. A load balancer in the data center is the same as a load balancer in the cloud. Object storage that we've had for the last 35 years in the data center is the same as the object storage on the cloud. It's not different. Same with the block storage we have in our data center. Same with the block storage we have with all clouds. So what do you actually get in a certification? They don't actually teach you the technology. They don't actually teach you the cloud. What they teach you is the marketing names of the services the cloud provider has. So instead of worrying about what AWS calls a virtual machine in EC2 instance, learn what is a virtual machine, learn how the hypervisor works, learn processor architecture and DRAM architecture, and guess what? You don't care if it's a virtual machine in your VMware environment, or it's an AWS EC2 instance, or an Oracle virtual machine, or an Azure virtual machine, or a Google Compute Engine instance, because it's the same thing. Learn block storage. And I don't care if Azure calls it a managed disk and AWS calls it elastic block storage. It's the same thing. You need a next generation firewall. Guess what? They're the same things. They work the same way as they do in the data center and not in the data center. So learn it to cloud. The same way as I'd tell you to learn to drive the car. If you learn the technology, you'll always be there. And GCP, folks, that's kind of what separated the CCIE from the other Cisco certifications. And what I mean by that is in the CCIE, sure, you had to configure stuff, but if more that you had to understand the protocols and the strengths and weaknesses of each one and the trade-offs of everything you had to do to be able to get to it. And those are the reasons when we had somebody with the CCIE where most of the stuff that they taught wasn't even Cisco. That, for example, the day after my CCIE exam, I was working on Riverstone Networks gear, I was working on Extreme Networks gear, and I was working on Juniper Networks gear. And the reason it was easy for me is I knew all the protocols. I knew how all the IP stuff worked. It was just the commands that were different. And that was in my engineering days. And when you're an architect, you're not going to touch the technology anyway. So you don't have to worry about the different commands on AWS, Azure, and Google. Instead, you need to know the technology. I can't hire somebody because they've got 10 certifications that doesn't understand the technology. But I can hire that one person that understands the virtual machines, the container orchestration, the storage area networks that we have, our network security options, our identity access management security options, our big data security options, understands the kind of databases we use and how to scale them. Those are the kind of skills that I hire for, but I don't care if you know the names of a single person services. So that's why as an architect, you have to know more than one. As an engineer, you'll still have to know more than one, but that's going to be a lot harder for the engineers because it's more configuration oriented. So they're going to have to specialize in knowing one better, but they're still going to have to understand how to do things on other clouds by being able to look up the different commands and know how to do it. I hope that makes sense, GCP folks. Got Google's professional security engineer and professional cloud architect certs, but you can't find your first job. They all want 2 years experience. You're at the point of giving up. Yes, I'm going to be able to help you. First, I want you to go to your webinar, and it has nothing to do with your experience. I can tell you exactly why you're not getting hired if all you've done is those 2 certs, and I'll tell you what you need to learn. And if you come to the webinar tomorrow, what I'll realistically speaking, I will talk to you personally, review your LinkedIn profile if you want. I'll give you feedback on that too. But I can tell you exactly why in a second. But I'm going to give you examples of people that have never worked in tech. Praveen, I don't want to use Praveen. Ivan Tamba was a waiter in Atlanta. His first job was at AWS as a solutions architect. I can tell you that Coyote was another college student, first job at AWS as a solutions architect after our training. I can tell you that Richard F. Became a security architect at MUFG Bank after our training, and it was first tech job. I can tell you Lenny, who was our video editor, got hired by Citrix as a solutions architect. I can tell you Jordan Kitko, he'd be happy to tell you he was already been promoted by AWS, got his first tech job at AWS straight out of college at Georgia Tech, and he also took our training. Jennifer E. was a mental health tech first job as at JP Morgan Chase as a solution architect. Wallace Agana, sales rep, first job, JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect. So that's not what's holding you back. Here's the problem in these certifications, and they're lacking everything you need for me to be able to hire you. And let me tell you what I mean. So in the security engineer certification, they teach you how to do a bunch of stuff on AWS. But what they don't teach you is what you need to know to deal with security. So what I mean by that is they don't teach cryptography for you to understand encryption. They don't teach cryptography so you would understand like the type of hashing, like the attacks on the cryptographic system. For example, like a rainbow attack. They don't teach you about the IP packet itself. So if you don't know about the IP packet itself, you don't know about the type of service bit, for example, in the IP header, which you could use to prioritize one person's traffic over another to mitigate the effects of a worm on your network, for example. They don't teach you how do you design your demilitarized zone. How do you micro segment your network? Should you segment your network into multiple VPCs? Do you allow routing between them? Do you put firewalls between them? So what they're lacking is all the security. They're basically teaching you how to, without all the stuff that you need to know to be able to do the job. Same thing with the Google Professional Cloud Architect. And we can easily help you. I promise you, it's not hard for you to get to your goal. Same thing with the Professional Cloud Architect. You give you a couple basic case studies, and they teach you about Compute Engine, but they don't tell you what it is. And if they don't tell you what it is, and you don't understand processor architecture, how are you going to move from one virtual machine to another virtual machine when you're going to have to change processor generations and each core has a different core capability? And how many cores do you even need to sign the virtual machine? So it's all the other stuff that's not in there. And the problem we get when we have people that do 101 hands-on labs and they get a bunch of certifications is they can't answer the questions. So what you need to do is very simple. And you need to basically learn the technology. Now, I don't know if you want to be a cloud architect, and I don't know if you want to be a security architect, and they are very different things. But you're going to need to learn the technology, and you're also going to learn the other stuff. So, Yaz, what if I told you, here's what you actually do as a cloud architect? Now, I'm going to tell you in my words, but I'm also going to tell you in what CIOs have actually asked for when they published this article in CIO magazine. And the reason I'm going to tell you this is you look at a job description and they're all meaningless. So when CIOs are asked, and what do you want in a cloud architect? Here's what they say. The three things that CIOs say they want their cloud architects to do is someone that can lead the cultural change for cloud adoption, develop and coordinate a cloud architecture, and develop a cloud strategy and coordinate the adoption process. What the heck does that mean? I'm going to tell you what we actually do. So here's what we typically do. A client comes to us because they've got a goal or a challenge in their business. They want to increase sales, for example, or they want to improve employee productivity. They want to be able to write more code by AI, whatever their business goal is. And in order to make this work, what we have to do is examine the organization's business. We need to look at the org chart. We need to look at the management structure. We need to learn the key business processes and the business's value streams. It's called the business architecture. And when we look at that, the next thing we need to do is think, is this the best way for the organization to do things in the future? Could the nurses work in a different way? Could the sales reps work in a different way? And can the technology enable them to do that? Now, when you finally figure out what you want to go and how the business wants to operate, the next thing you need to do as an architect is you need to create an architecture team, lead that architecture team, and it's going to be 15 to 50 people in most big architectures to baseline the organization's technology, understand what their network is, understand their data classification system, their data labeling system, understand their network security, understand their identity and access management, understanding their data assets, understanding what their network looks like, what everything looks like, what their 100 different applications look like. And then after that, we're going to have to craft a strategy to meet the new business needs to get them from the current platform to what they need in the future. So now we need to lead another architecture team. Now, of course, we'll be dealing with architectural creation of architectural documents, responding to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. We're going to have to go to various stakeholders and determine what their needs are, get their input and feedback. Then we're going to have to give a presentation back to the customer. Then we're going to have to build the business case, which you'll have to know how to do, respond to any RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, and then go sell your vision to the CIO, potentially the CEO, and even the board. And at the same time, communicate with technology people. So that's what we do. And none of that is actually taught in a certification. What's taught in the certification is what just happened to my screen. Oh, sorry. For some point, my script, my thing disconnected somewhere, so or at least it looked like it did. So in any case, the point is we need someone that has those skills, and you can learn all of those skills. And if you have those skills, immediately you're hired. And that's why Daniel Bosu, who didn't even graduate high school, took our training and got hired. Now, he previously spent $35,000 on some kind of boot camp, and he learned all these hands-on skills, but he didn't have the knowledge to get hired. So it's the knowledge piece. So the key is we have a guide in the description on how to become a cloud architect or how to become an enterprise architect. I'd like you to read that. If that's your goal, great. If your goal is security architecture or security engineering, I still want to help you. So please join us tomorrow on that free webinar. I'll check out your LinkedIn profile, because a lot of times what happens is that's off too. For example, I may have a cloud architect and they talk about cloud projects like building labs and setting WordPress websites and writing Python scripts. And that's not part of the architect job, even 1%. But responding to an RFI, RFP, RFQ is. Writing a thought leadership document is. So there's things that need to be on an architect's webinar, which of course you have to be able to do to put them on there, that are going to show you as an architect, like lead an architecture team, deliver presentations to the C-suite are going to be things you're going to be doing as an architect. Creation of an architectural repository, for example, leading an architectural review board. And that's another time what we see is the problem is people have never been taught the career and they try to just go figure it out. What ultimately happens is they don't know the right skills they need. So join us in that free webinar. And I'm going to do anything I can to help you. And you can get hired. You don't need experience, but you do need a specific set of skills. And we'll talk about what those skills are for whatever career you want. And if you've got a specific career, let me know, and I'll even get more specific now. But don't give up, because you can get there and you can have a job you can't even imagine and a career you will love. My team will bring in the next one in a second. What are the key areas solutions architects should sell in to be successful? Well, we have to understand that most solutions architects work for the cloud providers themselves. If we're not at the cloud provider, we're most likely working as a cloud architect where we're dealing with the organization's cloud environment. So if you're going to be a solutions architect, you have to be great at the following things. You have to be able to sell. Because if you're a solutions architect, then when you're at Cisco as a solutions architect, your job is to design, present, and sell Cisco equipment. If you're at AWS and your goal is to design, present, and sell AWS services. If you're at Microsoft and you're a solutions architect, you're designing, presenting, and selling Microsoft stuff. So you have to understand that in most cases, a solutions architect is a pre-sales role. There are other architects like cloud architects and enterprise architects that can be either pre-sales or post-sales. But generally speaking, solutions architect means design, present, and sell, only focus on a single vendor's technology. So if you understand that, that gives you a little more insight. Now, the solutions architect needs to be more technical than the cloud architect, and here's the reason why. And the solutions architect will typically earn less than the cloud architect as well, partially for that reason. So when you're a solutions architect, you are only going to deal with, for the most part, one provider's technology. So when you're at Cisco, for example, and you're a solutions architect, you're selling Cisco stuff, and your bonuses and or commissions and other things may be reflected by how much you actually sell. So the first thing is to be an expert in the company's products, because you can sell the company's products better if you know it. So you're going to have to know more about the products that AWS would have if you work at AWS than if you're the customer or the cloud architect, where you're focused on the organization's needs, and you're going to call the AWS solutions architect to give you feedback and information about the AWS stuff that you might use. So sales is going to be really important. Now, Pradeep, I have to tell you that 70 to 80% of all architectures on the cloud have provided no value for the business and have ultimately hurt the business. 70 to 80%. And here's the reason why. If you start with the technology like many solutions architects do because they don't know what not to do. So if you start with the tech and you don't start with the business processes, most likely there'll be no value to the solution. And here's what I mean by Pradeep. If you take something out of your data center and you move it to the cloud and you don't change the business process, you did nothing other than you move the technology. So that's the equivalent of taking your clothes from one closet in your house and moving it to another closet in your house. You didn't make any changes. So one of the things to be a solutions architect is you've got to know the company's products and you've got to know it well. And you've got to be good at sales. You also have to be good at leadership, because you're going to be leading proof of concepts. There's going to be proof of concepts, and you're going to be bringing in some engineers to do that while you're leading the engineers and managing the demo and managing the relationship with the client and bringing in food and entertaining people. So you're going to have to be able to lead in this role. Now, these roles of the solutions architect involves selling. It involves obtaining requirements, translating business requirements into technical requirements to the engineers that are going to build it, and documenting it up. So the architect role needs a lot of communication skills, incredibly good communication skills. Any architect role. The solution architect is the least of them because it's closest to the tech, but it still matters. Now, the solutions architect has to give presentations. In fact, the last part of any solutions architect interview is usually a presentation in front of a panel, because they want to see how you can sell. And how do you present technology? Are you babbling about the tech? Are you babbling how to configure it? Or are you describing what is your architecture? What were the trade-offs that you considered in your architecture? And how is that architecture going to improve your client's business performance? And if they get a good presentation, they're typically like to hire you. So it's mostly those skills. And a lot of it is business knowledge. Because if you don't know business, then you honestly can't help your clients improve their business with technology, because if you don't know business, how do you do it? So those are the things the solutions architects need to excel from a business perspective. I'm going to tell you the solutions architect job is 65% business. You'll be entertaining clients with your corporate American Express card or whatever you're using. You'll be traveling to meeting people. So there is that. Now, the technical skills are going to really based on what you're doing as a solutions architect. For example, if you're a solutions architect at Cisco selling security in a security environment, you might need to know a lot about security, network security, next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, the types of things you can do on the routers to enhance network security, like VLANs, private VLANs, 802.1x type authentication, MAC authentication, layer 2 access list, layer 3 access list, traffic prioritization and traffic shaping, throttling, policing, those kind of things. And if you're at Cisco, you're going to have to be an expert on that technology domain. By comparison, if you were at Cisco Voice, you'd be focused on voice and how voice works and voice trunking protocols. So it all depends where you're at. So you didn't say what kind of solutions architect, but you're going to have the good technical competency in your world. Now, you can do 1,000,001 labs and you're never going to get the technical competency. You have to understand the technology. And here's the example. And I can tell you every time all the people that come to me and they've done hundreds of projects, I can never hire them. And here's the reason why. All of you use your computer each day. Every last one of you. And if I'm going to hire someone that's going to spec out a server, I'm going to have someone that understands some degree of server knowledge, right? So all of you have used your computers for the last 10 years, and I'm going to ask you this question. Could you tell me the number of cores in your computer? Could you tell me the level 1 cache, level 2 cache, level 3 cache in terms of how much memory sits on there? Could you talk about the core-to-core communication in your notebook or desktop that you're actually using? Could you tell me about the number of PCI lanes that are sitting on that server and how that would determine how many GPUs you could use in an AI machine learning environment? Could you tell me what the interfaces are, NVMe, PCIe 3, 4, 5? Could you talk to me about the architectural trade-offs out there versus using a SATA port versus a SAS port on that computer? See, I'm just describing a single server. And the point is you could work on computers and Linux machines all day and still not understand the server. But if you're going to be an architect, you have to understand processor architecture. You have to understand compute because you're going to have to be able to select your servers. So you have to determine what your role is. But as a solution architect, you're going to have to understand the technology. You're going to have to understand how the technology fits together. You're going to have to understand what problems the technology can solve. You're going to have to deeply understand how that technology works, where that technology's breaking points are, and what are the competing technologies that you could use or should use to get your client to their best goal. What's going to be best for that client after evaluating all those trade-offs. So you get that, you're going to be great in any solutions architect role. Great, great, great. And it's a good role. You know, the solutions architect role was kind of my intro to technology, my entry-level role. I spent 3 months as a network engineer. I moved into a network architectural role immediately after that. And about a year later, I was a principal architect at Riverstone Networks, where I was consulting on IP multicast video solutions. And I loved it. So it is a very fun job. But those are the skills. Join us for the webinar. We can talk much more. I love talking architecture roles. I get people hired as architects constantly. And I just love this world because I used to practice internal medicine in my youth. And I just love networking. And when I was able to design these networks early in my career, to connect people, I thought it was cool. I just love networking. Love all of it, actually. But hope that helps. Please feel free to ask questions. We do want to help. Christian Smith, I know who you are. Good to see you. You're going through the security architect program. Wonderful. You're realizing that your resume needs some optimization. Should the resume focus be on risk management, legal, regulatory, or security? So, Christian, you're going to have multiple resumes depending upon the type of job that you actually want. So if I was looking for governance, compliance type roles, I would list my areas of expertise in that and the things that I've done in that. By comparison, if I was going to an identity and access management role, I would talk like an architect role, I would talk much more about that. So you can have 3 different resumes and they can all be legitimate, valid, and completely ethical because they're highlighting 3 different things. I'm going to tell you right now, I have 1 resume for internal medicine. case I want to volunteer somewhere. I don't need to do that for pay anymore. That was just that was my youth career. I've got another resume for healthcare information technology because I was the chief architect at Cisco for their entire healthcare vertical for a period of time. And that combined my medical background and networking background and enterprise architecture background. And I've got another executive resume that I have as well. And actually I have another networking resume too, but they're all things that I've done. So the resume needs to be tailored for the job. So the question I have for you also, Christian, is which part of security do you want to learn and master for the rest of your life? I probably wouldn't focus on legal and regulatory unless you're an attorney or plan to get a law degree. Because in any security architecture, look, we have our governance, resource compliance people, but they're not the people that are going to have the deep knowledge that we need to go to when it matters. So a lot of times we consult attorneys for these types of issues. And Christian, I know you don't have a law degree, so I probably wouldn't go down that path. I think your ability, and I know you, is you've got a lot of charm, you've got a lot of charisma, and you've got a lot of capabilities. You're incredibly smart. So I would focus on something that would, I think, would serve you better, that would really show off your ability to better sell, your ability to better lead. I think that would be a better way to highlight you. Dixon, could you highlight major areas to understand in order to the better career to be a solutions architect? Yes. So if we understand the solutions architect, Dixon, what we are doing is we're designing, we're presenting, and we're selling solutions. And we're also going to get to RAS 7, why the entry-level roles are going to be the hardest to get. And Chris from my team, while I answer that, can talk about why we talked about there being no more entry-level roles and why you should move into senior roles, not entry-level roles, years ago. So Chris, if you can provide some of those reasons, and Raz, I'm going to get to your question too, but there's a reason there's not entry-level roles. And we'll get to that in a while, but these other roles are not so competitive and there's massive shortages. It's a big difference. So if you understand the solutions architect role, a company's paying you to help sell a solution. Why do these companies generally create solutions architects at the cloud providers, technology providers? There's 2 people in a sales team, sometimes 3. You usually on your team have the following. You typically have an account executive, and everybody can call it a different thing, but you've got a sales rep, and you either have a sales engineer or you may have a solutions architect, which is a glorified sales engineer, which is further away from the technology and has more business skills, more leadership skills, and better there. So when you understand your job is to go into a client in a consulting-like relationship, learn about their business needs, learn about their business goals, and learn about their pain points, you have to understand that's the majority of the role. So you need to understand that. Now, you said solutions architect. Could you tell me in the chat box what kind of solutions architect you mean? Because we can have an MPLS solutions architect at Juniper that focuses on MPLS. I could have a security solutions architect at Cisco that's focusing on Cisco, that's focusing on security. I could have a voice solutions architect at Cisco that's focused on voice. I can have an AWS solutions architect that's focused on designing, presenting, and selling AWS solutions. I can have an Azure solutions architect that's focused on designing, presenting, selling Azure solutions. And I can have an NVIDIA solutions architect that's designing, presenting, and selling maybe some data center or AI solutions. So we need to know the type of solutions architect to get to the skill. Now, if you're going to be talking about a cloud solutions architect or a cloud architect, which a lot of people know us for, then I can give you some of those skills and I'd be more than happy to do so. But if it's a different kind of architect, please let me know which kind it is, because I want to give you the level of skills that will be right for that solutions architect, because all solution architect roles are different. But if you're dealing with a cloud solutions architect, the first thing you need to understand is a cloud is really a network and a data center that they rent you space in. So if you don't understand the network and the data center, you can't do any cloud architecture, realistically speaking, because how would you move something from the network and the data center to the cloud? If you don't know what it is, you can't. So for a cloud solutions architect, we need some networking skills. We definitely need some knowledge of BGP. We need some knowledge of IP addressing, subnetting, and supernetting, route aggregation, if you will. We need some knowledge of switching, which means things like VLANs, VLAN tagging, VLAN trunking. We typically need to think of link aggregation groups and other types of technologies. And then we need to know about what kind of WAN technology would we use to connect to the clouds, to connect clouds to each other, or vice versa. So with that, we're talking about things like would you use a private line versus an IP tech tunnel versus a software-defined WAN versus a SASE WAN? When and where would you use NAT? When would you use static NAT? When would you use dynamic NAT? When would you use PAT? And the associated things. You'd need to understand compute, which means servers and server virtualization and container orchestration, application virtualization, and function as a service type computing, like a Lambda function, Azure function, Google function, that kind of thing. You'll need to understand load balancers, application load balancers, network load balancers. You'll need to understand reverse proxies, forward proxies, and where you'll put them in your architecture. You'll need to understand storage, things like block storage, object storage, file storage, RAID, because you're going to have to, and you're also going to have to know about higher performance file systems, because block storage in the cloud is very slow compared to data center performance that we would get in our servers themselves. You're going to have to know those workarounds. You'll have to know the business applications you can use to drive transformation. When would you use unified communications versus an ERP versus a CRM system? You'd have to know security, things like why you probably wouldn't use the cloud provider's native security tools, why you might use next generation firewalls versus an advanced WAFs with behavioral anomaly detection, IDS, IPSs, VPN concentrators, data loss prevention strategies, encryption. So that's the technical piece behind what you need. But we have to understand that you're there to sell in most solutions architect roles, in most cloud architect roles. And even if you work for the client, you still have to sell it to the board. But if you work for a consulting firm or a vendor, you're selling it to the client, which always means sales skills, communication skills, presentation skills, executive writing skills, leadership skills, executive presence, or the ability to walk in and command the room, negotiation skills, and skills to build the business case. And that's why so many people come to us and they say they're not getting interviews, they can't get hired to be architects. And all of a sudden you learn that, and poof, they're hired overnight. But for the solutions architect, it really depends on which one and which exact type of solutions architect you want. Because the solutions architect is honestly a term that can mean anything. AT&T used to call their phone sales reps solutions architects. I've seen carpet stores call their sales reps solutions architects, but it's generally a pre-sales role. And it's generally focused on a single vendor's technology. But if you give me the type of solutions architect, I can get much more granular. So RAS 7, I want to talk about why there are no entry-level roles and why 2 years ago we made videos on our YouTube channel, and you'll find them, where we said stay away from entry-level roles, and there are no entry-level roles. There's no entry-level roles for the following reason. I can use AI, and it's better right now than a junior-level programmer. So I don't need to hire the junior-level programmer. I can use AI to write a Terraform script, a Python script, a Bash shell script, better than the entry-level person, but I don't need to pay them. So there is that. So that's the part of it. We also have to stand what were the entry-level roles? Racking and stacking servers, installing an operating system on servers, and doing all that manual entry stuff. Well, in the cloud environment, we're not racking and stacking anything. And we're typically not installing operating systems either. Now, the next thing to understand is, because whether we're using a private cloud now or a public cloud, I can now use one DevOps engineer who can write an infrastructure as code script assisted by AI that can do the work of 100 entry-level people. Done. All over. So I don't need those entry-level people. And let's talk about what happens and what are the challenges with the entry-level people and why you don't need to be entry-level. So the problem with hiring an entry-level person is they don't know what they don't know. Now, I'll tell you, when I took the CCNA exam, I thought I knew networking. I passed that thing after 4 days of studying. I'm like, this networking thing's a piece of cake. Then I became a CCNP. I was like, there's more to this networking thing than I was done. And then I passed my CCIE. And then I got put on my first, huge network architecture. And I said, I don't know anything. And I had to start learning. And that's when my career progression actually began. And the key is, the CCIE understands the impact. If I make this one change, what does it do to the rest of the parts of the system? If we add this firewall here, this firewall over here, it's going to break this part of the system. If we bring in these routes over here, what's it going to do to the rest of the system? So the entry-level roles, the people that know how to configure things and know how to just do stuff, I don't need. I need someone that understands the implications of their actions. That's what I need. I don't need the person that decided they were going to self-teach themselves a career that they don't even know what the career actually is or what we do in the career. So what they did is a whole bunch of projects. And let's say the person's in a project, they want to prove to me they're an architect, and they set up 10 virtual machines. They set up a 3-tier website. They connected it to the internet. They put AWS WAF and Shield on it. And they say, great, here's my project. And I'm going to ask them, okay, before you built that, what was your expected number of users that you had? How much dwell time did you need to be on that person's website before they would purchase something? Where were your users coming from? What type of web server did you choose? I see you used Apache. Why did you choose Apache versus Nginx? I see you put on a Linux system. Why did you use Linux versus IS? Not that there's better or worse. I want to know why the person actually did it. And could you tell me how many CPU cores were needed and what was your calculations based upon CPU and DRAM of your web application? And the person goes, I don't know, I put on the free web thing. And then I said, what did you use? What storage did you choose? What kind of storage performance can you use? How many hits per second can your website handle? They don't know. Because as the architect, these are the things that I care about. Even when I hire an engineer in today's world, because I don't need anybody that can click boxes. I need somebody that understands these things. Now, RAS 7, I'm going to tell you right now, if I interview 1,000 people, I'm probably not going to find one person that can really, really do the job. That's how bad it is. So employers will get 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 applications. Somebody's told people, just mass apply for a job. All they can do is say no. So now we have to take 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 applications, try to figure out how do we whittle them down to 50. And when we speak to the 50, we find out that half of those applications are fake to get past through the resume scanner. So it's not easy to hire people. But it's not experience they want. It doesn't matter. Pierre D was a sailboat operator before he got hired by Credera as a solutions architect after our training. Al was a sales rep before he got hired by Deloitte as a senior solutions architect as his first tech job. Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student before he got hired by North Highland. Gladys was a project manager before she got her first architect job. I can tell you that Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom before she got her first architect job at Microsoft. I can tell you that Jordan would be a perfect example that I would use. I could tell you that Ranchera was another person without a tech background before we got him hired. I can tell you so many people that have. I can tell you that Emmanuel in England just got his first tech job, and it's an enterprise architect job in the UK, and he's never had a tech job before. It's not hard to get a job when you have the right skills. The first job that I took wanted 10 years experience. The job that I had a year and a half later as a principal architect wanted 15. What we need and what we're looking for is the following. First, can the person do the job? And if you're not getting hired, come to the free webinar. I'll give you a mini interview and I'll gauge your skills and I'll tell you exactly why you're not getting hired. And I'll even look at your resume for free. And I'll tell you what needs to be if you're not getting it. But keep in mind, I don't need entry-level skills. And that's why Chris from my team put the video that I created. And when did I create that video, Chris? Why there's no entry-level jobs and why they're going to be the hardest jobs to get. But you give me someone we did it about a year ago. It's the same time we stopped selling our cloud engineering program because I knew those jobs were going to be dwindling, and I've created more architecture programs because architect jobs go up when there's new technologies that create change. So RAS 7, please join us in a webinar. I want to look, but it's not hard to get a job. There's so many about them. There's 750,000 open right now, just cybersecurity jobs just in the US. What's hard is finding the person that can do the job. What's hard is finding the person with the right level of knowledge, the right level of training, the right level of specifications. So you need to have the skills. Then you need to create the right resume. You have to create the right resume. Then you have to create the right relationship with the right recruiters so they can pitch you to the hiring manager so you don't have to apply. Then you have to know how to create the right brand, the right level of content, and the right kind of outreach. That's what we do, and we teach our clients how to do it. I wouldn't expect someone to just apply for 10,000 jobs. They're going to get 10,000 rejections. You have to be strategic in what you know. You have to know how to show your value. You have to know to prove the world what you do, what you did. So RAS 7, I wrote a paper. It was in about I think it was 2000. It might have been 2001. It was an intro to IP multicast. And I did it because my company said, Mike, you're an unknown gem, but nobody knows who you are. So they said, I need you to write a paper on IP multicast architectures. And I did. And I put a whole summer into writing this paper. And as soon as I wrote that paper, I got requested to travel 200,000 miles that year. I got offers for every job along the way. So join us in the free webinar. I'll help you. I want to make sure you can easily get what you need. There's plenty of opportunity for the people with the right skills. So we'll tell you how to get there. And join tomorrow. It's free. Anything I can do to help. Okay. You want to start with a cloud security architect job before moving on to cloud architect. Yes. So you're going to earn more money as a cloud security architect than you would as a cloud architect by about $20,000 or $30,000 a year. So I don't know that I would try to do that. I would either focus on being a security architect now and becoming an enterprise architect later. But a security architect's a specialty architect. So let's talk about what I do when I train security architects. So I do the following, and I've got a very good security architecture program that's basically less than 2 days pay for the average security architect with our current pricing. But let's tell you what I consider are valid security certifications and valid training. So the 3 certifications we teach for security architects are the CISSP, the CCSP, and the CISM. There are minimums. The second I put somebody with a CISSP on their resume, often they're getting interviews there. I typically often have to take away some of the cloud provider stuff because it's proprietary and it's not what people are going to be using in enterprise security anyway. So I have that. I have to teach zero trust. I have to teach the cloud. So I have to teach people the entire network, the entire data center. I need to teach people a good degree of networking so they understand where the network security is. And then I have to teach security. I have to teach security frameworks. I have to teach the types of IAM you could use, the types of risk management, how to quantify risk, for example, how to mitigate or transfer risk, whatever is appropriate, how to adhere to regulatory guidelines, how to create disaster recovery and business continuity planning sessions, how to create security policies, which is a big part of our job, how to create security procedures, security guidelines, and security standards, how security operations needs to run, what you need to put in application security. For example, things like input validation, for example, secure coding, vulnerability scanning of your code. Again, security operations means vulnerability scanning. It might be paying ethical hackers to break in to give you feedback on your systems. There might be some reporting kind of things that you need to do. There's going to be a lot of networking security things that you need, like firewalls, IDS, IPS, and VPN constructors, and all of it. So there's a lot to really go into to do that. But yes, that can be your first tech job. And I can give you was a student of ours. He used to be in the TV business, and now he's working as a security architect. I can tell you Michael in the UK, we trained him, and he's now working as a security architect. I can tell you Delroy was an emergency medical technician on ambulances, but he left our program and went to CDW as a cloud security architect, and you can too. So join us on one of the webinars. We'll tell you whatever the skills you need for the role, and I can ask you questions back and forth because I'd love to consult and really help out. What are the top triple threat towards the cloud engineer role? Agile, data findings, DevOps, data science. So could you tell me what you mean as a triple threat? Are you referring to the 3 things that could take out the cloud engineering career? That's what I typically see as a triple threat. So the things that I think that you have to worry about from the cloud engineering career from a threat perspective is AI can do a lot of the work as the engineer. AI can't do any of the work as the architect, but AI can do a lot of the work as the cloud engineer. AI can code. It's not great at it now, but it's pretty good. Google writes 25% of its code. Microsoft, as well as also writing a very large percentage of their code with AI. And Facebook has made it clear they're laying off junior programmers because of AI. So there's that big threat to cloud engineering is we're going to need less of them in the future, and AI could do it. The other threat to cloud engineers, which is why I don't typically recommend this career, but it's for people that love it and for people in developing nations, it could be the greatest thing ever. So with an architect, I need someone, generally speaking, that can be there. So I need my architect to be able to go to Miami and then New York and then London. I need someone that can be there. The engineer it doesn't matter. So I can pay my engineer $200,000-$300,000 in San Francisco, and they're still going to be poor. I can pay an engineer maybe $150,000 in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they're going to have plenty of money. Or I can pay them $30,000 in India, which is going to be the equivalent of about $200,000 or at least $150,000, and the person's again going to be happy. So you have to realize that those are the two biggest threats against the cloud engineering career. And that's why I don't sell cloud engineering training anymore. We had it. We had a really great program. We hired an expert from one of the big Linux vendors to do it with our Linux. It was great, but I couldn't sell the cloud engineering program. Now, I've also heard people use triple threat as what could you do to make your career better? So if you want to understand how to keep your cloud engineer career good and make more money in your career as the real triple threat, here's what I would tell you to do. Dive deep on one type of technology in cloud engineering and know it better than anybody in the world. So you're better than AI. I don't care what it is. It could be cloud networking, but be a master of something. Understand that in the future, we're going to need less of the engineers, but the people we have are going to have to be able to better collaborate. Because if I have AI doing my bottom 50% of the engineering and what I have left are the best of the best of the best, your ability to be great as an engineer is to create and build a team. So your leadership skills, your communication skills are going to help you. And I've worked with engineers where you bump up their communication skills, their leadership skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence. I've seen a multi-$100,000 increase in their salary. But that's also going to be the kind of thing that's going to keep you employed as an engineer. And I would also learn how to sell. And the reason I would learn how to sell is, if it comes down to it, where the economy gets tough, we often get rid of our back-end engineers because they're a cost factor, but we often increase the number of pre-sales engineers we have and solutions architects, because when the market's tough, we go out there and bring money in. You may pay $300,000 to a solutions architect, but if that solutions architect and that account manager are bringing in $20 million of business, they're cheap to keep because they're bringing in business and employing people. So those are the kind of things that you're typically dealing with. I hope that makes sense. Now, what skills do I think are good tech skills to master in the future? Networking is going to come back with a vengeance because of all the private clouds that are popping up. Security engineering is tight, but again, with security engineering, I would still do the same things and caution that I have for the cloud engineering. And any kind of AI architecture and AI engineering is going to be hot. So kind of keep those in the back of your mind. But please think about the economic impacts of the technology that's changing. We have very disruptive technology, and it's very important to plan the impact of that. Hope that helps, James. And please ask more or come back for a deeper question or explain to me what you meant by triple threat. Hi, Mike. What does a day in the life of an enterprise architect CISSP look like that specializes in cybersecurity? Well, you basically asked me a question that is the exact opposite. So I can tell you what a security architect does, and I can tell you what an enterprise architect does, but they're going in the opposite directions. So an enterprise architect is an executive. All architects are executives, but with the enterprise architects, we're the most executive. So what we're doing is we're spending a lot of time with the C-suite. We're working with the CIO or CTO quite a lot. We're going to be learning the organization's business needs. We're going to be working with the organization to map out the business architecture, the org chart, key business processes, key organizational value streams. And we're going to be mapping out that. And that's going to be 20% of our job is going to be at the C-suite level. Now, the next, I'd say, a couple of hours of our day is probably going to be meeting with clients, meeting with executives, meeting with anybody. So you're going to have a fair number of meetings. You'll be meeting with stakeholders across the enterprise. You'll be meeting with various technology vendors and solutions architects that are going to come in and have solutions for you. So you're going to be meeting with a lot of people. You'll also be meeting with engineering teams and engineering leaders and engineers that are going to ultimately build building things. You're also going to meet across the operations teams. So a lot of meetings, a lot of facilitation. You will be giving a lot of presentations to the board, presentations to the C-suite, presentations to engineering team. So there's going to be a lot of that. A lot of what we do at the enterprise architect level is cultural change. So if we want to bring in a disruptive technology that's going to change the way people live, work, and play, we can't just bring in the technology. We're going to have to create awareness campaigns. We're going to have to get stakeholder buy-in. We're going to have to develop training, and we're going to have to plan all these things. So a lot of our day involves around that. So if I were to say, and the other time, we're going to spend a lot of time doing research, a lot of time doing writing. So I can tell you in my years as an enterprise architect, what I typically did, I'll get to the security architect now, well, because I know that role real well, but I know them both well. So in the enterprise architect role, I'd say research 2 to 4 hours a day. And the rest of your day, I would say, would be in presentations. It would be leading teams. It would be in client meetings. Could be potentially client-facing. Could be internal meetings. It would be leading an architecture team, creating architectural documents, looking at architecture repositories, dealing with RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. So a whole lot of writing. This is an 80% business executive job. And it's going to be a lot of coordination and facilitation across the other architects. So we'll be bringing in the cloud architects that'll focus on the cloud, the network architects that'll focus on the network, the IAM architects that'll focus on IAM, the security architects will report into you for the security, the data scientists you'll have working for you, and everybody else. So when you start going into the executive role as the enterprise architect, that's the role. Now, all of a sudden, you now want to go down the security architect role. Now everything changes. Now you're focused on the organization's security. Now you're focused on the organization's risk management. You're still focused on processes, but you're not re-architecting them, generally speaking. Now you're dealing with risk mitigation plans and, quantifying assets, which some of that you would do as an enterprise architect. Now you're dealing with much more security policy kind of stuff. Now you're dealing with much more network security, application security, AI security. So you become the specialist. So when your architecture career, you can either go specialist or you can go business. And they're kind of the exact opposite direction. So that's the key. Now, you could be a security architect that has enterprise architecture training. And I truly believe that every security architect would benefit from enterprise architecture training, meaning better learning how the business operates, learning how to better navigate across business units, learning how to better manage stakeholders, learning how to better lead and getting all that business. That will make the security architect better. It really will. In much the same way that emotional intelligence training and empathy training and communications training would make a doctor better. So it'll make you better, but you can't be able to work as an enterprise architect and security architect. They're just not going to be the same. I still like the CISSP. I think it's great because they do a lot of enterprise architect-y things in there. The risk management things are very enterprise-y architect. The policy things are very enterprise-y architect. The coverage of various technologies is very enterprise-y architect. So I love the CISSP. I love it. But the key is that's what we're typically looking for. So those are the kind of things. So what projects would an enterprise architecture be involved in or that you could do? Well, you could create an architectural blueprint, for example, of AI security that could be a reference architecture for the industry, because that would be the kind of things that I would do as an enterprise architect. As an enterprise architect, I might create and lead an architecture team to plan out the next billion-dollar architecture. That's an architecture project that you might do. As an enterprise architect, I might be creating RFIs, RFPs, or RFQs for the end client. Or if I'm working at a company like Cisco or IBM as an enterprise architect, I may be responding to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. As an enterprise architect, I'm giving presentations constantly. If I wanted to be an enterprise architect, I'd go out there and start presenting at conferences. And if you got things like that, like we teach our students how to go do these things and how to reach out and how to increase their exposure, but go out there and increase their exposure. But that's what we do. So there's no hands-on in enterprise architecture. It's all about executiveness. And I can tell you, when I went from a network architect and a security architect, which I had done in my first architecture roles, which I love, by the way, and all of a sudden I had the opportunity for an enterprise architect role, which was 3 steps above the regular architects in the organization because it's much more of an executive role. I can tell you what I did. I got an MBA. After the MBA, I had to get an executive presence training, emotional intelligence training. I got more sales training. I got more leadership training. I got a lot of CXO relevancy training, and I had to take so much executive presence training and presentations training. At one point, they sent me to be taught by actors how to take up stage presence. I mean, it was crazy, but that's the role. The enterprise architect is an executive. The security architect is a strategy executive, but it's more strategic focus. Kind of hope that helps. If you've got more questions on either one, I'd love to answer them. Why do companies hire consultants for strategy and then when they can come up with and use their own in-house employees and executives to come up with it? So, Tommy, I'm going to give you a good reason why. It's one of the many good reasons why. So, there's a reason a lawyer that defends themselves is considered to be a fool, and a doctor does not write their a doctor doesn't become the doctor doesn't take care of themselves. And here's the reason why you can't be objective with yourself. So you may have a business, it may be doing great or it may be doing horrible, and the internal people may have no idea why. And that's one of the reasons you use outsiders. Outsiders are people that come from a different vantage point and a different perspective, can often give you strategic guidance. So that's one of the many reasons organizations use consultants. Another thing is consultants have areas of expertise that the people in the company probably don't. So if I'm trying to create a corporate strategy and I don't have the right strategic people in-house, and I've got a couple, but I need an army of 100 of them, I might want to hire people that are better at it. So consulting organizations have effective methodologies. They don't miss things. So there's a lot of good to be said with that. Now, what's the primary reason that people hire consulting companies? Okay, now I'll give you the reality, Tommy, and in which case a lot of reasons specifically with technology. So, Tommy, now I'm the Chief Information Officer of Go Cloud Architects. And my manager, Mike Gibbs, I don't want to tell this guy that the systems went down for any reason. And I don't want Mike to fire me if the systems go down. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call a Big Four consulting firm. I'm the CIO now. I'm going to spend $10 million in consulting fees. I'm going to get all these highly decorated people to say, Jeff, the CEO, he did a great job. This is a perfect architecture. CEO, I recommend this. So now 2 years later, when we get hacked, because things just happen, I, the CIO, can tell Mike, well, I called the Big Four consulting company. They all said this was the best idea. I guess things just happen. And I got to come up with a better area. But the point is it's used as that CYA many often. So when a CEO wants to make a decision and he doesn't want to get, or he or she doesn't want to get fired by the board if it doesn't work out, pay somebody $15 million of consulting fees, a whole bunch of experts blessed it, and therefore you must have done the prudent thing. So that's another reason why people hire consulting companies. Sometimes it's to get the outside perspective. Sometimes it's to get the expertise. And sometimes it's to say after the fact when it doesn't work, but I already asked the best. And I hope that's the reality of the answer. So great question there, Tommy J. It's good questions. I'm really happy to see them. Keep bringing them in. What is the expectation that an interviewer has for an Azure Solutions Architect? My expectation is that you can walk in, you can give a presentation to the C-suite, you have enough business acumen and know what to talk about in the C-suite, that you can lead an architecture team, you can lead a proof of concept, you know how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, that you can build a presentation good enough to help close a $50 million deal, your ability to lead teams. That's what I care about. Your ability to work across organizations, your ability to create the right level of documentation, and your ability to create designs that are going to work and not hurt the client's business. So I don't hear about it later. Those are what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody that can do the job. Now, I can tell you that's not enough. So I don't just need somebody that can do the job. I need someone that can do the job and do it well, but I need to trust this person. And that's a big thing. And what happens when I interview people and they can't answer questions on the resume? We can't trust this person, so we can't hire them. I need the person to know what they know and know what they don't know. So a person doesn't make a scary mistake. When a scary mistake, someone at Facebook that didn't understand BGP well enough and took the whole Facebook down for a half a day because of a BGP error. Or the person at Google Cloud that accidentally deleted a $240 billion hedge fund. Whoops. So I need people that know what they know and know what they don't know so they don't make dangerous mistakes. I need people that are energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about the job, because employers have enough people that don't want to work when they're actually at work, and I need people that want to work. Why else do I care if you're excited about the technology and you love it? Because that means you're going to go home on your spare time, you're going to learn more about the technology, and you're going to enhance your career, which means you're going to become more valuable to me over time. My expectation is that you're willing to go above and beyond. My expectation is you can get along with anybody on my team, regardless of their background, education, or level of experience, because I need everybody on my team, because they all think differently and act differently, and I need to bring that together for harmony to get the best results and to get the best creative thinking. So I need that. That's what I'm looking for. And if I find that, I hire it on that interview. Emmanuel was a student of ours, never had a tech job in his life. And in England about 3 weeks ago, we wowed him on an interview. And before he even got home, he had a job offer from the interview. So that's what it is. There's a massive shortage of these roles, but those are what we have. I don't care if you can write code. I don't care if you know Terraform. I don't care if you can touch Linux. I don't care what projects you've done. I care, can you do the job? And that's the job what we talked about. In your experience, how is an architect's end bonus determined? So it's typically a combination. So when you look at an architect compensation package, it's typically a base salary. There's typically a bonus, and your bonus is going to be based upon the following things. So typically, your bonus will have some sales component. Now, as you move up in the very executive roles, it could be corporate sales versus just a client sales, but there's typically a sales component. There's typically also a MBO component, which is something called a measurable business objectives component. So let's say if I've got a person that's quota was $40 million that year, and they came at 60, that's great. They're going to get much more. And or at least their sales rep bonus or quota was 60, but that was the number you're gauged on, is 60 or 40 million, but you brought in 60, you're going to earn a lot more. Then you'll have your measurable business objectives, like, for example, did you get a TOGAF 10 certification, which they might give you extra money on because it makes you look like a better consultant? Did you finish an MBA? They'll give you a little extra money. Did you give this number of presentations? Did you do this many, for example? How many presentations did you give at industry conferences? So there'll be some kind of things that they can check your MBOs. Then there's typically a corporate performance factor, like how well the company does, which could make it less or more. And then there's typically what's called an individual contributor factor, which means performance factor, which is your performance. So you could have a base salary of $200,000 an architect, which is fairly typical for someone with a good architecture background. They could have their bonus structured at 35%, meaning at 35%, that's what they're supposed to be. But they come in and the company sells more or their team sells more. So that could bring them to 50%. And then on top of that, there could be additional bonuses based on additional things that you actually did. So it's typically based on something like that. Your performance factor could double your bonus. So if you're planning on getting a bonus of 50, but you were so good at what you did, took extra client meetings, trained and developed a bunch of people, your bonus could be double that or triple that. So that's typically what goes in. Now, architect bonuses aren't usually year end. They're typically quarterly, because they're related and tied to sales, but typically they could be that way. They could be done year end or they could be done quarterly based upon whether a solutions architect is typically quarterly. And it's typically quarterly because they're more in the sales cycle. If you're a chief architect working for the company or an enterprise architect, it's typically less tied to sales and more tied towards corporate performance, just like the executive roles in the company. Hope that helps. Hello, Mike. Could I please break down the salary prospects of various cloud architects? So I can do that. Let me minimize this. As it turned out, Alonzo made me some graphics on this very recently. So let me do something with these graphics. Bear with me. Let me find them first. Let me do this. Okay. Okay, it worked. So I can tell you right now, the average salary for a security architect on Glassdoor is about 229, but it feels very low to me. I know plenty of security architects that earned far more than that decades ago, but keep that in the back of your mind. That's average. Now, as we look towards architect types and as we move forward, the pay tends to change, and you can see the more technical you are, the less you will earn. So when we start looking at these more techie roles, these more technical roles like a DevOps engineer or a cloud engineer, you notice their pay is typically on the lower end. Now, the average cloud architect pays somewhere around $200,000, but it still feels pretty light to me. For most people, we're seeing on the range of people we've graduated, I've seen as little as about 150 for people that finish the program and as much as 409 and that we've seen. And the enterprise architect pay, this is about normal where you're typically looking for, but this is really standard pay. And the reason I say it's very low and it's standard pay is there's ways that it can get much higher. So you can start seeing that, oops, I don't know what I did there. As we start moving into principal architect and distinguished architect and chief architect roles, the pay gets much higher. Now these still, I've seen much higher pay than this, but as you can see, you're dealing with something that gets higher. The principal architect is typically around 202 to 312. The distinguished architect gets a little higher, maxes out around 333, and a chief architect is a little on the higher side. But I can give you statistics from some of the cloud providers and other business jobs, which is why I'm so big on business acumen when I train people. Let me show you this one, why I'm very big on business acumen development. So you can see I was a principal architect in less than 2 years, and most people could with the right level of training after their first job. As you can see, AWS pays about $372 for a principal solutions architect. You don't see Microsoft here, which is about $378. Look, these numbers are pulled from Glassdoor. And Google's about $508 for a principal architect, but they tend to pay more. But what you really want to see here is a senior director at Palo Alto and a senior director at Cisco. They're coming in there about 530, 540. So why do I say this? What's the difference of these higher paid roles? It really comes down to how much can you actually sell? What is your ability to sell? What is your ability to close deals? And how attractive are you to the employer? So, there's lots of money to be made in architecture, and there's much higher paying roles than what I've shown you here. But they're for the people with the most business skills, the biggest ability to drive change. And I can tell you what I was taught many, many, many years ago. So what I was taught many years ago was as follows. I got pulled into a manager's office. It was about 23, 24 years ago. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was a CCIE. I had been in a CISSP boot camp that the company told us we all had to do. We all became CISSPs very quickly. It was fun certification, but I fell asleep in the boot camp. The instructor wasn't that good. I won't tell you who it was. So my manager pulls me out of that boot camp because it was the company's office, and he says, "Mike, can we talk?" And I was very worried that what my manager was going to say about falling asleep. And my manager said, "Mike, I know I made you do this CISSP along with everybody else. And yes, I want you to take it. But seriously, Mike, stop with the starts and stop with all the tech stuff." Huh? My manager said, "Look, the difference between you as a $150,000 entry junior level solutions architect like I was then and a $300,000 enterprise architect," my manager said to me, was, "It's the impact you can make on your clients." I'm like, "Aren't I making an impact?" And my manager says, "Mike, you're addressing the technology systems and you created great technology architectures, but it's the impact you can make. What is the biggest change you can make? Can you change the way the organization works? Can you change the financial metrics of the organization? Can you increase their sales? Can you solve their business problem?" I don't know. And he said, "If you did, you'd be earning more. Could you close $1 billion deal? Could you do this?" And then I did close $1 billion deal about a year and a half later, and I had that big job that he was talking about. But the key is it's the business, the executive, the leadership that enables you to do bigger things. So that's going to determine how far you go. You have the CISSP and the CCSP. You got them before you went for the GC cert, but you don't have the confidence. Well, yes, let me ask you this. If I told you that I had a bank that has a website with 1 million hits per day, and they have 30 million people's records, how would you create the demilitarized zone for that web app? If you could answer it, you have the skills. If you can't answer it, you don't know where to begin, and you won't have the confidence. I would also ask you this. So what if I told you that we have 3 clouds? How can we protect each cloud to make sure that if one cloud gets hacked, the rest of the clouds don't? While simultaneously exchanging database information across clouds. Could you think about how to do it? If I asked you, why is it in cloud computing that we keep having security breaches? What is it about cloud computing and the way the cloud can be environment is architected that makes it so much easier to have a security breach, specifically with object storage, compared to traditional data center storage? Would you understand why? And if the answer is no, you need to be trained for architecture. You just can't do the job. So when it comes to imposter syndrome or not being confident, we have to be real. If somebody just passed the certification, they're not going to know how to do these things. They're going to have to be taught. Now, I'll tell you, I'm a nurse practitioner. I used to practice internal medicine, and I never thought I could figure out how to train myself for internal medicine. I never thought I could teach myself, and I've done minor surgeries, how to do surgery, because I couldn't. I never thought I could teach myself how to fly an airplane, because I couldn't. I never thought I could be a lawyer without going to law school, because I couldn't. So what happens if you don't know the architect role and you don't know what we need, you don't even know what to learn. So I hope that makes sense. But if you come to that webinar tomorrow, I can assess you. I'll ask you 2 or 3 questions. I'll ask you a network security question, an identity question, and a couple other areas, and I'll gauge them. And I'll tell you, if you're ready, here's what you need to do. And if you're not ready, what you need to do. And it's free. So hope to see you there. But you're going to need more than just the certifications for the confidence. You think you lack executive presence? That will be a big thing that will get you, but executive presence is trainable. I didn't have it. In fact, I had a manager that was so obsessed about me developing executive presence about 15 years ago. I hired an executive coach. I literally took about 8 training sessions. Thankfully, the company paid for it. It was like $20,000 of training. They didn't pay for my executive coach. I did that to develop executive presence. And guess what? It paid for itself in less than the first 6 months in the job, paying for that training with a new promotion that I got. So executive presence is a great thing to develop. We can teach you how to develop that if you train with us. If not, there are good executive coaches that can help you with that, but it's critical for the job. Is international travel required for cloud architects? It depends on the level you are. So if you're at a junior or mid-level, chances is no, because there's plenty of people all over the world that can do it. But when you reach my level or David Lithicum's level or principal architect level or distinguished architect level, you're constantly traveling internationally. And here's the reason. You're going to be put on the biggest clients in the world. And when you're in the biggest clients in the world, you're going to have to speak with stakeholders all over the world. You're going to have to develop relationships with people all over the world to be effective. So the answer is you will be traveling. Internationally, it depends on how big you are and how big your clients are. So, and that's really going to be the key. So if you're on a global client, like I've always been in global clients, yeah, I'm always going meeting them throughout the world. But what if? Not all businesses are global businesses and not all architecture roles are global roles. So there's plenty of them that are not. So it's not necessarily required for international travel. It depends on the kind of clients you do. Most people earlier in their career, they're going to be traveling inside of their own country. And many of them will be able to do some of the things early on remotely, but they're still going to have to travel a little bit. But as you move up into your architecture career, the bigger your role is, the more global your role is, the bigger you'll be influencing your role. You're going to be doing more and more international travel. And I can tell you, once I reached that level, that I principal architect and or executive architect roles, that's when it was travel. I can tell you, I remember one week I left my house in Palm Beach. I flew up to DC to give a speech, left DC, went straight over to San Jose, got there, delivered a late afternoon speech. Right after I did the speech, took a client for dinner. And then right after that, I flew over to London on the night flips, gave a speech, and then went to Dubai the next day. That was kind of bad, but it's not normally like that. But when you reach a certain level, it'll be like that. But that's also been cut down dramatically by video conferencing. But yes, at the junior level, probably not. At the medium level, probably not. But once you start getting into bigger roles, the answer is yes, you'll be traveling internationally. And it's fun too. I got to go teach at Athens University, even though I'm Greek. It was in English. It was all kinds of fun doing that one time. I got to speak and design systems and all over the Middle East, which was incredibly fun. All over Europe, all over Australia, Central America, North America, Canada. I got to see the world and it was really fun. I got to bring my wife to all the nicest places. Great question. Hi, Mike. Which of the security architect or cloud architect requires technical skills? So you have to have technical knowledge, but neither one requires technical skills. So there's a big difference. And what I mean by the big distance is no architect role you'll be allowed to touch the technology as a general rule if it's a real architecture role. But you still have to understand. So for example, if I understand that I need a solution that gives me 2,000 cores, and each core has to have this kind of core performance, and each core is a certain amount of thing, then I need to figure out what those cores are. And then I can start looking at which processors are needed, and then I can determine what the right cost would be. So the key is to understand what I need, which is the underlying technology. To a cloud architect, what's the underlying technology? It's just a data center. It's just a data center. So that's the underlying technology. And if I have this, let me show it to you. Because I drew something out for some of my students the other day, and if I have it, I'll show it to you. And if I don't have it, so let me show you this, because I think this is going to really kind of help explain what is cloud computing and what are the skills that you need as a cloud architect. So bear with me so I can do this. So right now, I just designed a cloud. So I'm going to take a building, and in this building, here's what I'm going to do to the building. I'm going to bring in power, ideally from 2 different companies. I'm going to get multiple routers that are going to connect to remote locations. There were going to be what's called internet connections. And I'm going to have a firewall, which is going to connect me to multiple internet service providers for my internet connections. I am going to have generators, because when the power goes from either one of these 2 power companies, I need backup power. I typically have some battery power backup and some power conditioners between the time the power goes out and the generators kick on. And I'm going to have all kinds of cooling systems. Now in my data center, I'm going to have a lot of routers and switches, lots and lots of them. I'm going to have physical servers, and I'm going to have a physical storage. And I'm going to have these storage boxes, which are servers that have a whole bunch of hard drives. Now in my data center, I'm going to have something called the control plane. And here's what the control plane is going to do. And this is the way all data centers have been since 1999. So here's the control plane. And the control plane enables this. So if, for example, I want to create a new virtual machine, the control plane is going to go look through the pool of servers, and it's going to say, oh, server 27 has the capacity to create your 8-core 64 gigs of DRAM, and it's going to pop it there. So the workload will run here. When I want to stop the server, end the server, I'll tell the control plane to delete the server, and it goes back in the servable pools. I've got these storage area networks, but in this case, it's block storage, which is connected to the network. And all the servers can use block storage as virtual hard drives, just like they could in the cloud. Now I want application virtualization. Upload your code, and it goes. The control plane supports application virtualization. This is a data center right now. Upload my code, and it runs on whatever servers have capacity. Want to create a function like a Lambda function, Azure function as a service? It hits the control plane and it schedules it to run on the server. So this is my physical data center. Now, this could be running VMware, but all of a sudden I put cloud software on it. And VMware is one, but I can use Nutanix or OpenStack. And all of a sudden, now I've got my own cloud. Now, what's different than AWS Cloud? The AWS Cloud is owned by AWS and they have their control plane. So what you can see is that our data centers and the cloud data centers are identical. So what are you really renting in the cloud? You're renting a virtual data center. The cloud is like a big hotel and your virtual data center is your room. And maybe you have, in your data center, you have VLANs, but in this case, maybe instead of the cloud, you have VLANs, you have various VPCs. Or this could just be a various subnet on your cloud. And your servers can be on your subnets. Make sure these are different subnets that you'll have. And you'll put various virtual machines in these various subnets. For example, let me bear with me. And you'll put your virtual machines in your subnets. And what are you going to have in this virtual private cloud? I grabbed the wrong thing. You're going to have a virtual router that's going to connect you to different things and connect your subnets. You might have a connection to the internet. And if you have a connection to the internet, that'll be a router that connects to the internet. It's typically called an internet gateway, just like you would have in your data center. It's the same kind of internet gateway. This will be your internet. Let me just put this over here, your internet. So you can see what you're getting on the cloud is just a virtual data center. And of course, anything that you would have in your data center, you could have a load balancer in front of various virtual machines. So it's all the same. So when I need a cloud architect, I need the person that underneath their servers. These could have been containers. We could use load balancers for containers, all of it. But the key is the cloud is just a virtual version of the data center. And here's what happens. Somebody finishes the cloud. They have 10 different certifications, but they don't understand what a cloud is. They don't understand what it's a data center, and they can't design anything. So what you need to understand is the cloud, the network, and the data center. All the technologies necessary to get your clients to their goals. All of it. You'll be there. I hope I answered that question. If I didn't or answered it insufficiently, please let me know. So you're going to have to understand all that technology, how all that technology works, and how it fits together architecturally, not how to build it. Different technical skill. You recently started an apprenticeship as a network administrator. You feel you've learned a lot in 5 months. That's wonderful. However, you want to change the cloud architecture. Are there any qualifications that can help? First, Kitten Crusader. I absolutely love the name. I've got one cat that I rescued, although I think she made my life better, and I probably have another one coming really soon. Love the Kitten Crusader. So the key is admin work doesn't translate, and engineering work doesn't translate into architecture. So I love that you've been a network administrator, but here's what I need to know: the difference between architecture and engineering. From an architect perspective, I need somebody that understands the difference between a type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5, and a type 7 LSA in OSPF. I need someone that understands where OSPF propagates like external routes in a distance vector environment versus how the Geist algorithm works, how the routers send the links and how the routers do their computations. From the architecture perspective, I need the person to understand where to summarize and aggregate routes in order to minimize the database loads so that we don't have problems with CPU or DRAM. Now, that's just OSPF. Now, for the admin that's been in there that type router OSPF1 and type some commands, none of those skills translate over. So we have to understand that most of the people that have been an engineer for a while need to be retrained to be an architect because they're not like each other. It's basically like saying, I've been a nurse for a long time. Now, how do I work as a doctor? So there is that. So what you're going to need to learn is you're going to need architecture. Now, which things could you learn to do it? You've got to learn the network and the data center. So if you wanted to learn the network, there's things that I could recommend. For example, there's this book, Route TCP/IP. There's 3 volumes of this that will help you really understand the internet protocol. And if you wanted to be a network architect, for example, you need to know it. And guess what? If you need to be a cloud architect, you still need to know this. And that's why we teach that level of knowledge to our cloud architects. Now, you probably also would need to understand BGP to be a cloud architect, not how to configure it. But you should literally be able to go through that Bassam Halabi book, Internet Routing Architectures, and truly understand what we're actually talking about. How would you lay out your BGP? Transitive versus non-transitive. How would you apply a policy? How would you secure it? How would you scale your IBGP? How would you architect your route reflectors? Whatever, all that stuff. So it's all about knowing the protocol, knowing the finite state machine, knowing how to prioritize traffic, knowing how to leverage your attributes to manipulate traffic. None of the things that are held to. So you want to be a cloud architect? Why don't you join me in tomorrow's free webinar where I can go over the exact skills and I can test you if you want. I can see if you've developed the networking skills as for example, in the 5 months as a network admin. And if you have, I'll tell you. But I can tell you, I've also found lots of cloud engineers, DevOps engineers, and network engineers that have a decade or more of experience. And they still need to learn how to become an architect. Because an engineer and architect, they honestly have nothing to do with each other. And that's where people go wrong. They want to be an architect. They learn DevOps. They learn SysOps. They learn the code. And none of that is related to what we actually do as architects. That's the biggest issue. And I can tell you, I see it every day. I can tell you that it takes me just as long to train a really good cloud engineer like Harsha to get his first job as it took for me to take a geologist like Jeffrey to get him hired. It took me a little less. And I can tell you that I've worked with lots of people with 10 and 20 years experience in various careers, but engineering is not architecture. It will not teach you how to design systems. So the reason the people that build the buildings don't get asked to design buildings is that building things doesn't teach you architecture. It teaches you how to build. It doesn't teach you architectural principles. It doesn't teach you architecture guidelines. And those are more what we're going to be concerned about in our world and the things that we typically do. So, we think about the principles that we're trying to deal with and what we're trying to achieve. And I'll give you some insight. You'll see why it's not going to make that much of a difference. We're trying to align the business, the people, the processes, and the technology. Now that, not a skill that you would ever get as an engineer. We're trying to standardize and simplify things. So we have to look at the organization's underlying technology, the types of technology, and look for various ways that we can standardize on various protocols, various tools, various systems that'll make it easier to manage later. We're also looking to simplify because if we have got a complex environment and we didn't design it elegantly, when we try to scale or grow or change in a new direction, it'll be challenging, if not impossible. We typically try to create a reusable, more modular architecture. And these are principles of how to create things in a building block that you can reuse that block in multiple places to enhance your efficiency. Now, in order to do that, you're going to have to work across an organization, deliver presentations, lead strategic people, which is, again, architecture skills. Now, you're going to have to design for business agility, meaning for the ability of the business to change directions. And if you don't understand business, you're not going to be able to design for business agility because you won't know the types of directions an architect would train. And obviously, we have to teach that. But if you're not with us, you can learn some of these things in an MBA program, but you got to learn these things. And when it comes to enterprise architecture, we're not looking for somebody to deliver any of that stuff that they saw in an AWS certification and come in there with the scary vendor lock-in, vendor proprietary stuff that is going to preclude us from doing what we need. We need somebody to go in there and say, I can't use DynamoDB, but I can use Apache Cassandra or MongoDB across my 3 clouds because 98% of people are multi-cloud. Now, Apache Cassandra, I can write it all in nodes, which means it's going to be better for write-heavy databases. But MongoDB's got this cool stuff. I'm probably going to use it for more read-heavy databases. So I need you to be able to weigh the architectural trade-offs between which ones and know what not to use. When I have an architect, I need someone that understands risk management, that can quantify and calculate an organization's risk. And whether that be a quantitative analysis based upon risk to specific assets, qualitative analysis, because my architect needs to sell that security to the management. And if you can't convince the company by quantifying that they have $100 million of risk, they're going to look at your $25 million security architecture as crazy. But when you show them they've got $100 million of risk and they see it's only $25 million to mitigate this risk, well, that's kind of cheap. So you're going to have that. You're going to have to be able to help an organization use its data as a strategic asset, which means knowing how to plan data hygiene practices, data normalization practices, data governance practices, data labeling type practices. So I could keep going, but I'm here trying to show you the difference of what we focus on as an architect versus what we focus on as an engineer. So the time you got hands-on is great. I love it. I love hands-on experience, but it's not going to be the experience that's going to teach you what you need. Can I show you jobs or LinkedIn that our security architect program is for? I'll tell you who they're for, and then I'm going to talk about job descriptions. Our security architect program is designed for people to work at Microsoft, Cisco, Palo Alto, where we have graduates, Zscaler, where we have graduates working, Fortinet, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan, Chase Bank, CDW, Praviti, LeaseWeb, and all the other wonderful places our architects work. Now let's talk about job descriptions. Now I'm going to have my team actually give you list an actual LinkedIn post from one of the executives at Amazon himself. He was a VP at AWS, and he'll talk about why all these job descriptions are meaningless. Now, I've got lots of videos for years about why job descriptions are meaningless, and here's the reason why, Crafted Creations. I want to hire myself a security architect, and here's what I do. I call HR and finance, and I say, hey, I'm hiring a security architect, and they say, great, we'll write a job description. Now, the finance people and the HR people have no idea what an architect is or a security architect. So what they do is Google, and they cut and paste from 10 different jobs that all look security oriented, all in 10 different careers. Now they got a 50-page thing. Now, I can tell you right now, that's the job description. Now, sometimes I would write a job description that would be a good job description, or other managers would write a job description. Now, we write a job description for a job. Now, 3 months later, by the time I'm able to hire someone, I don't need that job anymore, and I've got a totally different job. So that's another reason. So Crafted Creations, I've never actually applied for a company that didn't hire me. I've never been on an interview and did not gotten the job, although in 2 of the 5 jobs that I actually interviewed and took in my entire career, I went in one time for a regular architect role, and they wanted me to be a distinguished architect. And in one case, I went in to be an engineer for my first job, and they hired me as a senior engineer. So any of those companies I list you will find Go Cloud Careers architects working on, regardless of the job descriptions that had any of these engineering things that you're trying to describe. We know how to get our students hired, and they're working in all these places. We even have people in high places in various governments throughout the world that we've trained for super high security environments that have never worked in tech before. Chris, go to the next one. And I hope you provided that LinkedIn, as well as the video that we actually did, where we showed all the environments of other people saying and articles saying why job descriptions are meaningless. Thank you for that, Chris. Oh, Chris from my team is saying patience. Give him a minute. In my experience, what are the most important soft skills for an enterprise architect to be successful? And what is the greatest challenges that I've ever faced? And my team will provide that. Just give them a chance. So what I will tell you is the most critical skill for the enterprise architect to be able to be effective is business knowledge. Now, in order to do their job, we're dealing a job that's really about leadership. So the ability to exercise influence is going to be very critical to the role. Now, nobody hands an architect a piece of paper that says build this. So in order to determine what we're even going to design, what's even in scope for the architecture and anything else, we're going to have to be able to ask questions. So all in all, communication skills are going to be the greatest skill and the most critical skill for the architect, because if we don't get the actual information the correct, then our inputs are bad, then our architecture will fail. And I'll tell you, in my experience, I will tell you that most architectures, they got the wrong information in the first place because the person didn't have the communication skills. And in much of my life, I've literally been cleaning up the mistakes of people that got the wrong information. So communication skills are definitely the ability to exercise influence and get people to see things your way is going to be there. The ability to sell, because either you're going to sell your architecture to the client. Maybe you're working at a Cisco and you've got to go sell your $100 million architecture. That's quite possible. Or you're going to work at a client and you're going to have to sell the board and potentially the CEO, potentially the board, the CIO, on why they're going to invest in your $80 million cloud architecture or $200 million enterprise architecture or $1 billion enterprise architectures like I work on. So you're going to have that. You're going to have executive presence, because if you walk in the room and say, "Hi, everybody, my name's Mike Gibbs," the C-suite in 1/10 of 1 second already made a determination of not to listen to you if you walked in there. And it's sad, but you have to deal with that. You have to have executive communication skills, which is knowing what to say to the executive, when to say it, how to get your information from someone that's overly busy. You have to have interviewing skills. So when someone's asking a question, you can redirect them and get the right information, the ability to probe questions. You need to be able to be like a strategic consultant, where as soon as you deal with the situation, you realize it could be one of 10 different things. So you create a list of what those 10 different things are, and you create mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive questions and hypotheses to rule in or rule out to find the actual source of the problem. So these are the majority of the things we do. We're going to have to manage stakeholders. We're going to have to manage vendors. So any kind of management skill you can think of, any kind of sales or leadership skill you can think of. But also, you have to have the business knowledge. You have to be able to understand business architecture, business processes, value streams, etc., because these are going to be the things that you need to do. Because at the end of the day, what is enterprise architecture? It's aligning the organization's people, processes, and technology. That's going to be the difference. So let's talk about the difference between transformation and change. So I live in Florida. It's 95 degrees all day, every single day. So I have a coaster on my desk. I have a coaster right here, and I can move my water bottle to right over here and put it on my desk. Now, that's the reality of what the majority of cloud migrations are and enterprise projects are. I take something from somewhere and I stick it to somewhere else. Now, I want you to think, is my life going to change by moving my water? Of course not. Unless somebody takes my water away from me and I'm in the desert, that might be a problem. But where it goes, for the most part, it doesn't matter. Well, now, if somebody said, "Mike, I've got a different water bottle for you. This water bottle will resist the heat and it'll keep your water cold all day long. This water bottle has none of those horrible plasticky chemicals in it either, Mike." Now I changed my water bottle. It changed my life. I've got cold water and plastic chemicals in my water, and now I'm happy. Not that I'm worried about the chemicals in my water, but the point is it changed something. So the ability of the enterprise architect to drive change is really what matters. The ability to drive change. And all of that is all your business skills. So great questions. Now, what kind of challenges have I faced? Well, here's the biggest challenge I faced in most of the enterprise architectures that I worked in. Statistically speaking, Adalbert, if I got your name right, and I hope I did, 70 to 80% of all architectures fail to provide any business value. 70 to 80% of the time. So the biggest challenge for me is because I typically power shit in after there's people have made real big mistakes, which is most of the time. I have to go in there and I deal with a customer who's initially not very happy. So I typically need to go in there, really talk to the customer, establish a sense of confidence after people have messed up for long periods of time, be able to show them that I can and will get things better, be able to repair the damaged relationship, and then when nobody's looking, leave the room, get back to my company, raise heck, and get the 50 or 100 people that are necessary to fix the client's problems and create a beautiful architecture for them. So that's the biggest problem that I've had, is people really didn't understand architecture. They tried to engineer their way into solutions. They focused too much on the tech and all the wrong tech, because the people didn't understand the tech that mattered. They only knew their section of the tech, and we had disasters. So that's the biggest issue that I've actually had. Is for me, it's always walking in and repairing the mistake from someone else. That's the biggest challenge I had. All in all, I'd say the enterprise architect job that I had was the easiest and most fun role of my entire life. After putting my way through college, being a paramedic, after practicing emergency medicine in the ER and on ambulances, you know what? To me, I feel like this is the easiest and most relaxing job I've ever had. So I absolutely love it. But I'm happy to ask more questions, and I think it's a great job. Hey, you've noticed that US architects earn more than UK based ones? Typically true. Is it possible to earn a low end 6-figure job in London? Easily. Easily. So I know plenty of people in England that are making very good salaries, very good salaries. People that are making potentially 150, 200,000 pounds that are given cars by their employer that are living very good lives. So the answer is yes, you can. So keep that in the back of your mind. You know, at one point, it looked like England was going to go to a 4-day work week, and employers really pulled back on pay, or some of the offers I saw coming in lower immediately after. And here's the reason why. Zimcan IT, parts of Europe are exploring 4-day work weeks, which means the customer actually needs to hire, and generally speaking, more employees to do the job. So if there's 4 days that people are working as opposed to 5, I need approximately 20% more employees, generally speaking, which means I have to pay the person 20% less plus whatever benefits it would be. So that can affect it. So that is one thing that could be potentially interacting architect pay in certain places. If you can only work a certain number of hours, employees will obviously pay you less and then just hire more employees. It's working part-time jobs versus full-time jobs, but that's neither here nor there. But no, I've seen people get some very good salaries in England and all over Europe as well. But there are bigger salaries, generally speaking, in America for architects. And I've seen some pretty incredible salaries in Canada as well. Lots of incredible salaries, especially for people working in the Google Cloud in Canada, even those without a lot of deep experience or expertise, because there's such a shortage of it and there's so much Google Cloud work. The supply and demand curve there is pretty good for Google Cloud. Okay, so the next one will be our last one for the day. But of course, before we do this, I want to invite you to make sure that you join our free architecture webinar tomorrow. We'll go over the role. We'll talk about what we do, and I'll answer any questions. And if you want, if you've not been getting interviews and you want me, I'll look at your LinkedIn profile while we're there. I'm happy to do it. If you think you're ready, I'll give you a 3 to 5 question interview, and I can tell you, are you ready to be the job or where are you going to need to stop? And I'm happy to do it live and free on this webinar. So hope to meet you tomorrow. And also don't forget to register for the free CCSK security training. Now let's get to the last question. You have AWS experience in cloud and DevOps. What are the skills you need to focus on to become an architect? You have to start learning architecture skills from, for the most part, scratch. So Summit, you've now been building these things. So would you know how to spec one processor against another processor? Would you know how to mitigate the slow block storage speeds in the cloud? Would you know how to design 2 private lines to AWS without getting out of order packets? Would you know how to architect the demilitarized zones where your web applications are? Would you know how to micro segment your architecture on the cloud? So, these are the kind of things you need to do as a security architect. As a cloud architect, for example. Do you know how to design your multi-cloud solution? Do you understand how to do the routing between your clouds, the wide area connectivity between the clouds? Do you know which AWS tools and DevOps tools not to use because they don't work multi-cloud, which is the reality? Do you know how to build a business case to convince me why I should invest in your? Do you know how to deliver an architecture presentation? Do you know how to respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ? Do you know how to create and build an architecture team? Do you know how to create and build an architecture repository? Do you know how to create and build an architecture review board? Do you know how to lead and facilitate a meeting? Do you know how to show the client the business value in the architecture? So you have a lot of great engineering experience, which is wonderful. It is wonderful. But as a general, the engineering is about one thing. The architecture is very different. It's why Ivan Tamba, who was a 24-year-old food server, who was a college student at Georgia Tech, left our program in 6 months and was hired by AWS as a solutions architect. And at the same time, Jawad, who was a rock star cloud engineer with 10 years of cloud engineering experience, took about a year to train to get him hired by AWS as a solutions architect, because you're going to have to unlearn how to think like an engineer and start focusing on thinking like an architect. So you're pretty much going to start at scratch. I can give you Pritipal as an example of someone I had about 20 years of development and DevOps, left our training program as an enterprise architect. It took about a year, but it took about a year for Wallace Agana, who was a sales rep, to get hired by JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect, because architecture and engineering really don't have very much to do with each other. As architects, we are all about the underlying technology, how it works, how it fits, and how it integrates. And generally speaking, in doing the work, we're about how to build it. So what I can do and I can recommend is just hearing your engineering experience, I would tell you would need to start from scratch based upon interviewing about 1,000 different engineers. But Summit, you might actually be great. So if you want, come to our webinar tomorrow and I can interview you and I can tell you what you need. But generally speaking, engineering doesn't get you there. You'll need training. But I'm willing to check and see, because it's not always the case, because it's not what you've done. It's what you know. And I can tell you the easiest people that I've trained to be architects, and I've trained a lot of people. Camille was a nurse, super easy problem getting her a senior architect job because it was her background. Noah was a social worker. So the easiest people that I've gotten architect jobs are usually sales reps. And the reason they're sales reps is a couple of reasons. One is they're very good at getting information from clients. They typically have very good leadership skills. They typically have good business acumen, and they know how to sell themselves on an interview or whatever. So let's be fair. Sales reps, usually easy. The job that's most closest to the actual architect is actually the physician and the attorney. And I can explain to you why. In the physician role, in the attorney role, someone comes to an office and they say, I have a problem. And what the physician does is they ask a whole lot of questions to determine what the problem is. Then the physician basically orders any kind of testing that's necessary to see what that actual problem is. Then the physician creates a diagnosis, and then they create a treatment plan. This medication 3 times a day, physical therapy, what have you. Now, the architect meets with the client. They learn about the client's problems. They ask a lot of questions to determine what the business challenges are or problems are. They bring in some cloud engineers and some DevOps engineers who baseline the systems and tell you what you got. And then they create a plan, a diagnosis about what the problem is, and a plan. Doctor interview a patient, architect interview a client, doctor asks some questions, architect asks some questions, doctor orders some tests, architect orders some engineers to run some tests, doctor make a diagnosis, architect make a diagnosis, doctor make a plan, architect make a plan. So the architect job is nothing like engineering. It's more like the physician, more like the attorney, or how would you sell $1 billion house? What kind of house do you want? Could you tell me what you really like? Let me show you various things. Okay, I know what you want, and now I'm going to build the plan to sell it to you. So it's much more in line with sales. It's much more in line with medicine. It's much more in line with law than it has anything to do with engineering. Join our webinar, and I'd like to help you, but I hope that makes sense to you. If you got to learn something today, if you had fun, if you enjoyed it, maybe give us a like. Maybe share this video with someone that you think could help them to help them get to their goal a little quicker. Maybe subscribe to our channel, hit the bell to be notified of new videos. Join us in the free webinar. I look forward to meeting you. It's on Zoom. We can talk. I can assess you, and I'll do anything I can to help you in any technology career you desire. This is my